an Academy Award-winning movie out of her whistleblowing. Julian, the door has been closed on him, and it's worse than a cell door, much, much worse than a cell door.
And I know that that you've been a long time anti-war advocate, and I was wondering what were the most significant publications that WikiLeaks made public that struck home on that front for you.
Yeah, in my film, The Killings of Tony Blair, I used footage from WikiLeaks. In fact, the film opens with two infamous clips. The American voice saying, light them up, as these Iraqi civilians and journalists, by the way, are then eviscerated in machine gun fire. That's how the film begins. And then the second scene, I think, is the American soldiers in a bombed out building, and one of the soldiers shouting, he's pretending he's dead, he's pretending he's dead, and then firing his weapon and saying, he's effing dead now. Both of these pieces of footage were used in my film. But during the run-up to the war, through the war, and in the aftermath of the war, I said the war, of course, there have been many wars before and after, but the Iraq war, for someone of my generation, is burned most vividly into our brains. And WikiLeaks was an essential tool for us in that struggle. The cables, the US diplomatic cables, were like gold dust for us because they shone a light, a bright light, in places that would have been otherwise in darkness, and arrows that were flying in darkness and would have done their dirty work without their purveyor ever being known, were exposed by. Will always be a hero to me.
Absolutely, and it's really frustrating to see not just the US but the UK government's role in persecuting a journalist who, as we've said multiple times, hasn't been charged, much less convicted publicly with any crime. What is your feeling towards the UK government as it continues to be such an instrument of the US in this case?
Correct me if I've got the number wrong, but I think we've spent about £15 million on the Metropolitan Police coverage of the Ecuador embassy. This at a time when London is in the grip of a murder wave, when we have more murders than New York City, imagine, when someone is checking in to a hospital in London with a stab wound every 12 minutes, 5 per hour, when people are discharging machine guns at other people in London, when we have whatever stage our alert is, it must be high. We are constantly told, and we are, not just told, we are constantly at risk from terrorism in London, and we can spare all these officers and spend all this money on Julian Assange, who hasn't committed any crime. This is a kind of madness. And it's also because, this is a difficult thing to say, because, of course, the judiciary in Britain is theoretically independent. But I have no doubt at all that if Julian falls into the hands of the British courts, he will be extradited. Somehow will ensure that. And if he disappears into the maw of the US justice system, we'll never see him again. We won't even see him at his trial. His trial will be held in secret, in camera, and we'll never see him again. We'll never touch his hand again. And therefore, the stakes could not be higher. And it's such a pity. I don't know if you don't want to go into this, stop me. But that the former president of Ecuador has himself now fallen victim.
No, that's something I'd like you to talk about, please. That's incredibly important.
Yeah. He has himself fallen victim to another setup. You know, you couldn't make it up. First, they get Julian behind the 8 ball, and then they go after the man who allowed him at least to be at the table, at the pool table. And there's no outrage about it. Not many people even know about it. And candidly, I didn't know about it until a few days ago. And it's such an obvious playbook going on here. Pressure on Ecuador to somehow deliver up this prize for the American deep state. And additional pressure by an arrest warrant now executed in Belgium, for goodness sake, against the former president of Ecuador. They're trying everything. They're trying everything that they can to extinguish this light that is Julian Assange. And all we can do is pray and agitate and organize to build the biggest and best solidarity movement outside that we can. And I take my hat off to those of you who spend so much time doing that.
Well, what we are doing and organizing would not be possible if it wasn't for guests like yourself willing to come on and not only express solidarity with Julian, but to talk about it in the way that it actually exists, as opposed to the way that the media wants us to perceive it having happened. And the ongoing horror that is happening to Julian Assange is something that, again, we would not be able to just sit here and talk about by ourselves. It takes amazing panelists like you to come on and describe that. So thank you.
People have joined you this weekend. I've seen people of great eminence and people of historical importance have joined the vigil. And it's true that some of the best people in the world are with you in this campaign. But a lot of people who should be are not. And they need to examine their own consciences as to why they are not.
I think that's a really, really important point. Definitely. It is sometimes very disappointing to see people that otherwise stand for the values that Julian Assange and WikiLeaks have held up not coming to their aid and their defense. I think that's unfortunately evidence of the degree of persecution as far as character. The character assassination of Julian Assange has been relentless over the years. So I think that...
you know, this happens to political prisoners. It's not enough just to bang them up. You have to reduce their purchase on the outside. You have to reduce their reputation. And you have to... That's true, and enlarge it. And you have to invent that which is not true if you can't find anything that is. And both of these things have happened with Julian. And, you know, the most outlandish lies You know, I read in liberal newspapers that, you know, Julian's rude to people. Well, first of all, I know that that is not true. And my whole family, including my children, know that that is not true. But even if it was true, the world is full of rude people, and he would have more reason than most to be rude, but he isn't rude. I've even read in liberal papers, I should name them, but perhaps I won't, you know, that he has bad personal hygiene and all this kind of utter garbage, Goebbelian lies, but they are all used to chip away at the real Julian Assange and to chip away at his standing so that they can peel off layer after layer of those who know in their hearts that they should be here on this vigil tonight, and who are looking for excuses not to be. And those excuses are oftentimes so bizarre, so banal as to be a real discredit to them.
Absolutely. And I think that the fact that the media has reduced itself to making fun of Julian Assange's hygiene is so telling about their character and the level that they have to stoop to trivialize the pain and suffering that Julian goes through. It says everything about the media and nothing about Julian Assange.
Well, there was one of them I did in fact respond to, which claimed that Julian had walked into the boardroom in the Ecuador embassy without his trousers while an important diplomatic meeting was taking place. First of all, there is no boardroom. Secondly, the person who it was said had told this story and who had been a worker in the embassy had never actually worked in the embassy. And thirdly, Julian would never walk around without his trousers. And that's the level. That's the level of evil, wickedness that is deployed in the attempt to smear Julian. And I had, you know, I don't know, I spent half an hour of my life combating that particular ridiculous lie.
Absolutely. And I know that, you know, we've seen the lies not only in the mainstream press, but also in the altering of the historical record on venues like Wikipedia. And I know that Craig Murray did a great job pointing out the vicious trolling and editing that happens on anti-war the pages of anti-war advocates like yourself. You know, how do you see that in contrast to what Julian Assange and WikiLeaks does? You know, it's like the embodiment of the lies of the legacy press almost.
Well, I mean, it's the reverse side of the coin. WikiLeaks exposes the crimes of the rich and powerful. Wikipedia and its industry of neocon cells exposes through lying and distorting those who oppose the crimes of the rich and powerful.
Absolutely.
WikiLeaks exposes people with the power to kill other people, who kill other people in industrial quantities. It exposes people who steal other people's money, either directly or indirectly through tax evasion and so on. That's what WikiLeaks does. Wikipedia tries to damage the reputation of those who attack those crimes. So you literally are diametrically opposite. You are completely opposite. And yet your names are so similar. Wikipedia with WikiLeaks. you could easily, mistype it in your telephone. And
Absolutely.
it's the difference between heaven and hell.
Yeah, it's incredible to think that the trolling that happens on Wikipedia and in the legacy press against, truth tellers and WikiLeaks and Julian Assange.
I'm one of the biggest victims of this. Yeah. I seem to have a whole neocon cell specifically dedicated to me. And I happen to know that some of them are very important people indeed. It's flattering in a way. And I'm lucky. I have never read my Wikipedia page because I knew that it would be a playground for those that hate me. And why would I want to read what the people who hate me have to say? And so dispassionately, I can say, as someone who has never read their Wikipedia page and will never read it, I can say, don't trust Wikipedia, on which anyone with the energy to expend to smear other people can do so. And no checks and balances exist to ensure that anything on my Wikipedia page is true. I don't even know if they've got my mother's name right. I do know that they've got her politics wrong. So they might not have her name right. Don't assume that anything about Wikipedia is true. WikiLeaks, on the other hand, I think I'm right in saying, has never once published anything that turned out to be untrue, has never had to retract or apologize for anything that it has ever published. There cannot be a newspaper or a media organization anywhere in the world that could say that. Anywhere.
Absolutely. Even the most well-intentioned media organizations will have had to make a retraction or an update to their content at some time or another. WikiLeaks is completely unique in that way.
The more I hadn't thought to say that, but the more you think about that fact, the more astounding that is. So they hate WikiLeaks because it's never been wrong. I always joke, if I were to write an autobiography, it would be called I Was Right About Everything. And I was right about every big thing. But WikiLeaks has been right, not just about every big thing, but about every small thing. It's been right about everything. That's why they hate it. That's why they hate it. If you'd been making blunders, if Julian had been telling lies or distorting things, it would be much easier for them. But it's not easy when you're trying to destroy an organization. Wow, that's quite a record. Not enough people know. Not enough people know that.
And I think that that's exactly why you see them having to turn to these schoolyard type insults about, hygiene or anything else, because they cannot attack the veracity of his work.
But by the way, for the record, his hygiene is impeccable. His manners are impeccable. He's not rude in the slightest. None of these things are true. But the fact that such childish, schoolyard, vulgar lies are all they've got, it's a tribute to him and it's a tribute to WikiLeaks.
Absolutely. And you definitely, if there had ever been a misstep, that these powers that be would absolutely have jumped all over it. And the fact that they're quarantined into these ridiculous insults that are obviously a sham is testament to Julian Assange's work and the work of everyone at WikiLeaks to do such a stellar, unique job.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a proper gentleman, is Julian. And I mean that, let me break that word down. He's a gentle man. He's a gentle person that sat behind a keyboard trying to tell the world the truth. What's not to love about that? I never saw any bad thing about Julian. And there's not many people I could say that about. Even my own friends. Even my own friends. I wish they didn't do this or that or put things this way or that. But Julian's not like that. He's studious, he's steady, he's calm, measured, and deadly accurate. Deadly accurate. That's why he's where he is.
Absolutely. And one of the things that is also so, heart-wrenching about that is that some of the things that he has done for the benefit of other, whistleblowers and truth tellers, he must have done knowing that it would impact his own ability to see freedom. When he sent help to Edward Snowden, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, he did that. So, that's why he's in the tradition. That's why he's in the tradition, as Dr. Cynthia was saying. He knew that at any time he could have been killed. In a way, it's a mercy that he's still alive, because other people like him have been killed. He could have been killed. They could have grabbed him secretly, like they did. I was involved in the case to some extent, long time ago, 25 years ago. Mordechai Vanunu, a brave Jewish whistleblower, came to London to reveal the secrets of Israel's illegal nuclear arsenal. He was honey-trapped in London, drugged, bound, gagged, and smuggled to Israel and sentenced to 20 years in solitary confinement. That could have happened to Julian. So, in a sense, we're lucky that has not yet happened. What they are trying to do is judicially make it happen. Vanunu's jaws were literally wired up like Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs, so that he could not speak in court and divulge any more of the secrets of Israel's crimes, for it is a crime to acquire illegal nuclear weapons, not declare them, not subject them to inspection and so on. Wired together so that he could not speak. They want, through a secret trial in the United States, to wire Julian Assange's jaws together and wire his fingers together so that he can no longer expose these crimes.
I think that is the most brutal imagery, and the fact that it's a real instance that happened to somebody is just unbelievable. But it shows the degree to which any pretense that the United States, UK, Israel have to some sort of moral authority is so deeply, deeply wrong. It just goes without saying, but it's so deeply hypocritical.
As Oscar Wilde put it, the more they talked of their honor, the faster I counted my spoons. The people who talk about their moral standing, the people who talk about their democracies, their human rights, and so on, are but hypocrites. They are amongst the biggest criminals the world has ever seen. The crime against Iraq is one of the gravest crimes in all history. 1 million people died. ISIS were begat. Extremism cascaded around the whole world directly as a result of that crime in Iraq. And while these criminals were carrying out their crime, what was Julian Assange doing? He was trying to stop them. He was trying to expose them. And if he never did anything else in his life, either before or afterwards, his efforts to stop that big crime in Iraq, to expose that big crime in Iraq, should guarantee him a place on the pantheon of heroes. But instead, it's led him to the place he now is. It's a very, very, very sad tale.
Absolutely. And I think that, as you say, he is part of that pantheon of people like, and I was talking about this with Cynthia in the last segment, that he is very much, in my opinion, like a Nelson Mandela. And I think that the response to his situation has to be broad and global, and is similar to that response to Nelson Mandela's imprisonment. And so I think, and other wonderful truth tellers and activists across time, we have to imitate those movements. Do you think that that is beginning to happen at this point?
Possibly not yet. And of course, the danger is that it could reach that critical mass only when it's too late. If Julian, God forbid, were to be seized, were to be extradited, were to be sentenced in a secret trial in the United States, undoubtedly he would become an even greater world figure, but it would be too late then. It would be too late. We must try and force a solution, a diplomatic solution to this question. Julian has political asylum. He is a citizen of Ecuador. Whoever, the British state in the first instance, must negotiate a way out of this situation. Julian Assange, I'm not being too dramatic, I hope his mother's not watching. Julian Assange could die in there. He literally could die. And then his blood will be on the hands of the British state. Or and we could spend another 15 million on keeping him there. And in that case, that would be on the hands of the British state. So as there is no extant case for extradition yet, one assumes, in British hands, then the onus, the ball, is in the British diplomatic court. And the sensible thing to do, the humane thing to do, the just thing to do would be to allow Assange safe passage to Ecuador, of which he is a citizen, and who have granted him political asylum. That's the way out. There's no reason why not. He could pay a fine to the British for having broken the bail conditions, or he could be sentenced to suspended sentence for that, given that he spent instead 5 years in a room, far more than he would have got for breaking the bail conditions.
Multiple times more than the maximum sentence.
Hundreds of times. So that's the way to solve this. And if we had a sane British government, and maybe one day we will, then that sane British government should negotiate that solution. But I don't have any confidence that Boris Johnson is going to negotiate it. Not yet, anyway.
No, and I think that just a moment ago, you brought up an incredibly important point again, which is the health conditions that Julian Assange is in, not just the discomfort generally of being isolated to such a small room, but the fact that, as Susie Dawson and others have reported, his doctors have assessed him to be in a grave health situation before the added isolation took place. So yes, we all need to recognize how dangerous this is. Even if he's not in custody in the United States or by the UK, he's still in danger.
We talked about Mandela. No, let's be clear. Julian is not Mandela. Nobody is Mandela. But
very true.
Even the Boers in apartheid South Africa could not afford the risk of Nelson Mandela dying in their jail. That's why they moved him off the island to first Pollsmoor Prison and then Pollsmoor Hospital. They moved him there because they couldn't run the risk of him dying in their hands. And I say to the British government, you're running the same risks. In fact, you're not being as sensible even as the apartheid regime in South Africa was. You should, at the very least, allow Julian to move to a hospital and have diplomatic protection while he's there. The risk they're taking, the tightrope they're walking, is that somehow we're crying wolf here. Well, it's not us who's saying Julian's life's in danger. It's highly respected medical professionals who are saying it. They're not lying. They don't lie. Doctors don't tell lies. And all these eminent medical practitioners have all testified the state of Julian's health before, as you say, and all the health risks that come with that.
Absolutely. And I am asking all of the panelists, because we don't know whether Julian Assange will be able to see this vigil eventually or not, but on the off chance that he does, what would you say to Julian Assange right now to keep his spirits up and to let him know that he's not alone?
I give you my warmest embrace. Although I'm British and we don't normally do this kind of thing, I kiss you on your forehead. You are never out of my thoughts, out of thoughts of my wife and even my children. My children came up with 101 ways that we could spring Julian from his incarceration. Small children I'm talking about, who sat contemplating Batman, Superman type superhero ways that we could help Julian escape. So you're never out of our thoughts. You will never leave our hearts. And we, as long as God gives us breath, we'll continue to defend you and to agitate for your release. And it's my view, as I said at the beginning, Julian Assange should be a Nobel Peace Prize winner, not a prisoner. And insofar as he's a prisoner, all of us are prisoners. We are all imprisoned by Julian Assange's imprisonment, because the truth is being imprisoned. And it's the truth that we need to set us all free.
That is incredibly well put, and I hope that our audience really takes that in and contemplates that, because it's the absolute truth. It has just been an honor to have you with us today and to be able to speak with you about this. I cannot express my personal thanks enough, much less for our audience's sake. And I'm sorry, there's a little bit of delay because of the long distance involved. But thank you so much for speaking with us.
Pleasure.
Everyone, that was George Galloway, an amazing, amazing activist, anti-war advocate, MP, writer and columnist and journalist. And I will be right back with you all after our theme song plays in order to bring you our next guest. Thank you so much for sticking with us and your patience. Great.